Digitizing Hawking's office. This ghostly point cloud shows how the Science Museum preserves Stephen Hawking's office in digital form so that it can be explored by online audiences. Dave Pattern and John Stack of the museum worked with the company's ScanLab projects to capture a digital record of his office and its contents, using high-resolution photography by means of two cameras and infrared lasers, each taking around a quarter of an hour. The 3D scanning allowed us to capture the office and its contents before the objects were all packed up and moved to the Science Museum, said Paten. The scans will allow us to recreate the office digitally in all sorts of exciting ways, as well as help us recreate the office physically at the museum at some point in the future. Using a process known as light detection and ranging, or LIDAR, thousands of measurements were made with lasers to map objects in the scene, while the colors in the digital scan were captured using digital cameras in a process called photogrammetry. To ensure the measurements and captured colors were accurate, it was important to have the right level of lighting within the room, which was achieved by dividing it into two zones to prevent any shadowing and using external lighting balloons outside the office's windows. Our curator of physics, Jean-Andres Leon, and assistant digital curator, Rachel Mascaronis, have been working with ScanLab projects to produce videos, walkthroughs, and panoramic views to help virtual audiences explore the office for themselves. They can move from the kitchen, for example, where shelves are used to keep some of Hawking's books, to the windowsills, adorned with his awards, or inspect the graffiti-strewn blackboard that kept a remarkable record of an international conference he organized in Cambridge. In an earlier project with ScanLab projects, the museum made a virtual version of its shipping gallery open from 1963 until 2012, so future generations could explore this two-tiered exhibition of hundreds of exhibits along with many dioramas, chronicling maritime technology across time and space. Above, using a process known as light detection and ranging, or LIDAR, thousands of measurements were made with lasers to map objects and the scene, while the colors in the digital scan were captured using digital cameras in a process called photogrammetry. 1. Early life and work. Young Hawking. Stephen Hawking's love of science and mathematics can be traced back to his days in St. Albans, a cathedral city north of London. His formative years at school are contained in this book, and its presence in the office underlines their significance to him. They could not shut him up. Born during the Second World War in 1942 to the research biologist Dr. Frank Hawking and his wife Isabel, Stephen Hawking had moved from Highgate, London to St. Albans in 1950. In Highgate, our family seemed fairly normal, he subsequently wrote in his memoir, but in St. Albans, I think we were definitely regarded as eccentric. For a short time, Hawking attended St. Albans High School for Girls, which was then open to boys until the age of 10. By that time, he had two sisters, Mary and Philippa. His parents would adopt Edward when Stephen was 14. In the 2021 documentary, Hawking, Can You Hear Me?, his sister Mary recalled how, as a schoolboy, Stephen had a passion for model trains, was interested in finding out how things worked, and was always one for puzzles. Stephen was always looking for the rules that would let him win. Another Hawking trait was clear by then. He loved being the center of attention. Mary described how, aged 8, he was invited up on stage to sing in a pantomime in Golders Green. He belted out a long song, and they could not shut him up. Hawking then attended St. Albans School, where his classmates called him Einstein, and with friends he could discuss many things, not least the origin of the universe. In his last 2 years of school, Hawking wanted to specialize in mathematics and physics, even though he thought physics was boring because it was easy and obvious, and his father thought both pursuits a waste of time compared with medicine. When Stephen's sister would go on to study, then practice. Hawking was far from being a perfect pupil. He was late to learn to read, his handwriting was bad, and he could be lazy. Fortunately, his sister Dikran Tata proved an inspiration. Many teachers were boring, Hawking recalled. Not Mr. Tata. His classes were lively and exciting. Everything could be debated. Together we built my first computer. It was made with electromechanical switches. Behind every exceptional person, he added, there is an exceptional teacher. Thanks to Mr. Tata, I became a professor of mathematics at Cambridge, in a position once held by Isaac Newton. See also, On the Shoulders of Lucasian Giants, page 62. Above, Hawking, aged 4, 1946. His sister Mary recalled how as a schoolboy, Stephen had a passion for model trains and was interested in finding out how things worked, and was always one for puzzles. Above, book with history of St. Albans School, where Hawking was educated. Born Not for Ourselves, The Story of St. Albans School, by Nigel Watson, 2014. Physics and hijinks. Stephen Hawking started out his academic career as an able-bodied student and became a rowing coxswain in his third year, thanks to his strong voice, lightweight, and daredevil attitude. Although he could not have been aware of it at the time, his years as an undergraduate at University College, Oxford, between 1959 and 1962 marked the end of the healthiest chapter of his life. It was only during his final year, the year the photograph shown below was taken, that he noticed he was getting clumsy and struggling with mundane tasks, such as tying his shoelaces. After falling down some stairs, the doctor told him to lay off the beer, and he was only eventually diagnosed with motor neuron disease after his 21st birthday, 1963, by which time he was a graduate student at Cambridge. Motor neuron disease is when the nerve cells, neurons that control muscles, degenerate and die. MND is the generic term in the United Kingdom. In the United States, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, is used more widely. Above, photograph of Hawking at his Oxford graduation in 1962, which has degraded with exposure to sunlight. Above, a portrait of Hawking, Centre, and fellow students during his undergraduate years at Oxford. Fairly disastrous. Stephen agreed to apply to his father's alma mater, University College, Oxford, but reluctantly so, because he wanted to study mathematics and the college had no fellow in the subject. However, his father was convinced that there would be few career prospects for mathematicians and argued that Stephen should read medicine instead. They compromised on a natural science, physics, and Stephen went up to Oxford in 1959 at the age of 17, which even his school headmaster thought was too young. He was lonely during his first 2 years, but his social life blossomed during his third, not least because he joined the University College Boat Club. He was an enthusiastic participant in hijinks, which he admitted in his memoir that my coxswain career was fairly disastrous, a reference to a disqualification in various collisions. Among the items that he kept as mementos of his health science student days was his coxswain jacket. There is a note attached to the blazer to say he wore the cream-colored jacket when he was thrown into the river, an Oxbridge victory tradition that only a year later would have been inconceivable for him to perform. Office curator Juan Andres Leon commented, the note that tells the story was pinned on decades later by his assistant at the time, Gina Lee York, who asked him if the jacket should be washed. He said no. Not another gray man. By Hawking's own estimate, he had averaged an hour of work a day as an undergraduate at Oxford, in keeping with the anti-work attitudes of his peers, who regarded anyone diligent enough to get a better class of degree as a gray man. Hawking did not prepare properly for his finals, slept poorly the night before, and studiously avoided any questions that demanded factual knowledge. Even so, he performed well enough in his final examinations to be called for a viva, an oral examination, to determine which side of the divide between first and second class degree he lay. When When asked about his future, he told the examiners that if they rewarded him a first-class degree, he would leave Oxford and go to Cambridge, but if he got a second, he would stay in Oxford. They dully gave him a first, as of course he hoped they would. After receiving his first-class BA degree in physics, he traveled during the long summer vacation to Iran with a friend, encountering an earthquake in Buenzara that claimed the lives of 12,000 people. Though he was near the epicenter, he did not notice the earthquakes as he was ill with dysentery and bouncing around in a bus at the time, even breaking a rib as he was thrown against a seat. Safely home, he began his graduate work at Trinity Hall, Cambridge, in October 1962. Life in Cambridge began with disappointment. He had wanted to work with Fred Hoyle, the most famous British astronomer of the day. Instead, he ended up with Denise Sciamma, of whom I had not heard. However, his memoir added that, in retrospect, it was probably for the best. Opposite, Oxford coxing blazer with the University College badge, worn by Stephen Hawking as a student and when he was thrown into the Cherwell River, a tradition after winning. Above, Hawking far right as a cox for the University College rowing team, Oxford. By Hawking's own estimate, he averaged an hour of work a day as an undergraduate at Oxford, in keeping with the anti-work attitudes of his peers, who regarded anyone diligent as a gray man. Hawking's PhD thesis. This modest book with its green cloth binding may look somewhat underwhelming. However, this PhD thesis is Stephen Hawking's intellectual equivalent, The Big Bang, and all the more remarkable because he thought he might never finish writing it. What a testament to his cosmic talent and steely determination. The thesis, Properties of Expanding Universes, was typed by his new wife and submitted while Hawking was a 23-year-old graduate student at Trinity Hall, Cambridge, and provides an intriguing glimpse of what was going through his mind during a time that was difficult for him, as it was exciting. When Hawking completed his PhD, early in 1966, several leading theoretical physicists already regarded him as an outstandingly promising researcher, comments Graham Vermello, Hawking's biographer. His thesis topic was cosmology, the study of the origins and development of the entire universe, widely regarded by hardcore physicists at the time as a discreditable and flaky subject, says Vermello. Because there was so little data to test new theories, Hawking was well aware of cosmology's reputation. He goes on, but he set his heart on studying it, confident that it would soon evolve into a major branch of science. Big Bang Theory. Hawking's thesis would provide a crucial support for the Big Bang Theory, a pejorative name coined by the influential English astronomer Fred Hoyle, who argued that its proponents were somehow influenced by the Book of Genesis, seeking a moment of creation and perhaps even a divine creator. Hoyle himself favored an older and even more established idea which he had put forward in 1948, together with Hermann Bondi and Thomas Gould, known as the steady-state model. According to this theory, rather than stemming from a moment of creation, the universe has been around forever, and new stars are seeded in the gaps created as the universe expands. It is a tribute to Hawking and his colleagues who popularized the notion of the Big Bang that nowadays this ultimate moment of creation is so pervasive and seems so logical to us. How could anyone have ever thought otherwise? When he began his PhD in autumn 1962, says Vermello, he was determined to tackle only big cosmological questions, whose answers were likely to change the way we think about the cosmos. Despite the diagnosis of his illness likely to be fatal within a few years, and his research supervisor, Denise Sciamma's gentle warnings about aiming too high, Hawking refused to compromise. Hawking's thesis set him on the path to become the most famous scientist in the world. Together, Penrose and Hawking showed that Einstein's general theory of relativity predicts the existence of singularities in the birth of the universe, or black holes. Introduction. The idea that the universe is expanding is of recent origin. All the early cosmologies were essentially stationary, and even Einstein, whose theory of relativity is the basis for almost all modern developments in cosmology, found it natural to suggest a static model of the universe. However, there is a very grave difficulty associated with a static model, such as Einstein's, which is supposed to have existed for an infinite time. For if the stars had been radiating energy at their present rates for an infinite time, they would have needed an infinite supply of energy. Further, the flux of radiation now would be infinite. Alternatively, if they had only a limited supply of energy, the whole universe would by now have reached thermal equilibrium, which is certainly not the case. This difficulty was noticed by Olbers, who, however, was not able to suggest any solution. The discovery of the recession of the nebulae by Hubble led to the abandonment of static models in favor of ones which were expanding. Clearly, there are several possibilities. The universe may have expanded from a highly dense state a finite time ago, the so-called Big Bang model. Another is that the present expansion may have been preceded by a contraction, which,